Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out on this absolutely fantastic day to Dog Hill. Louisvillians love dogs, and our celebration of dogs and some great progress for them is one of the reasons we are here. With me today, Wayne Pacelle, President of Animal Wellness Action, and Senator Rand Paul, here to talk about their collaboration on a bill that will not only help dogs, it will help millions of other animals, and it will help medical patients relative to progress in the development of new pharmaceuticals. Louisville has a long, storied history with medicine. We, of course, all know that Louisville is where the first artificial heart was implanted. We're just a couple miles away from one of the greatest medical campuses in the United States. And it is a great pleasure to be able to combine our love for animals with Senator Paul's concern for Americans to talk about how we have made some progress together. I want to introduce first Wayne Pacelle. He is the president and founder of Animal Wellness Action. He and Senator Paul have worked hard, incredibly hard, to make this progress today. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Wayne Pacelle.
Thank you. Joseph Grove, thank you very much, and thanks everybody for coming today. Again, I'm Wayne Pacelle, and we're here as kind of a first celebration. We have a little more action to do before we have kind of a conclusive celebration. But I want to tell you why this is such an important national policy that has been proposed by Senator Paul. So the legislation that he introduced just 1 year ago, and that he has managed to shepherd through the Senate in 1 year, which I can tell you is a very rapid timeline for national legislation to advance. Oftentimes it takes a while to socialize a new idea, to wrangle support, and in the Senate, typically if something's going to move, it has to have bipartisan support. So he has fashioned bipartisan support on this legislation. It's called the FDA Modernization Act. And he introduced it with a bipartisan group last October with Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, Senator Mike Braun of Indiana, Ben Ray Lujan, a Democrat of New Mexico, and John Kennedy, a Republican of Louisiana. And we were particularly happy that Senator Paul introduced it because he is an MD and I think speaks with special credibility on these public health issues. And he's also a very senior member of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, which has jurisdiction over these issues. So this bill seeks to eliminate a mandate for animal testing that has been in place since 1938. So just as we were coming out of the Depression, this Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act was passed, and it requires extensive animal testing, typically starting with smaller mammals and then graduating to dogs, beagles mainly, and then also to primates and other animals. And the animal tests are really what extend the preclinical part of the process of drug development. You know, we as a nation, all of us who have had health problems here or there, we benefit by having drugs that can palliate the problems that we have or hopefully cure diseases or other maladies that we have. And whether they're bone drugs or cancer drugs or heart drugs or pain relief drugs, there are an incredible number of drugs that are advanced in the marketplace. The animal testing drags out the process of approval for years. So it actually takes 10 to 15 years for a drug to kind of be conceived by a drug developer, whether it's a government agency or an academic institution or a pharmaceutical company. It takes 10 to 15 years to get to market. And it costs $1 to $6 billion on the front end to develop this drug. And all of these capital costs that are built on the front end of this process really limit the range of drug development. So the minor diseases that afflict a substantial number of Americans don't get sufficient attention because a lot of the companies don't want to invest this money if they're not going to get a yield on the back end and when the product is commercially used. So we have, in general, it's considered, the U.S. has been said to be the gold standard for drug development, but the reality is it's a terribly flawed paradigm. And the data show that when we do 100 tests for safety and efficacy for drugs, because the United States is concerned about two things when it comes to drug development. Is the drug going to be safe? Will it cause you harm? Will it have an adverse reaction? Will it kill you? And second, will it be effective in doing as advertised? If it's an anti-cancer drug, will it help with that? So these drugs are advanced through this long process. The animal tests show up in 100 cases. If it passes muster with the animal tests, in 90 to 95 of those cases, when it goes to human clinical trials, it fails in human clinical trials. What sort of process is acceptable with a 90 to 95% failure rate? And the only conclusion is that animals, non-human animals, are not particularly predictive of the human response to drugs. And in 1938, they were probably the best proxy in terms of measuring and trying to gauge what the safety and effectiveness of a drug is. But now it's 84 years later, and we have human-based biology testing methods like liver on a chip or kidney on a chip built into a microphysiological system. We have cell-based assays. We have all sorts of alternative methods that are going to be cheaper, faster, safer, and we won't have to use all these animals with all of the moral costs and all the economic costs that are built in. You know, we have some of these beagles here today. They are the ones that are mainly used in the dog tests, and it's 59,000 beagles a year. Think of that, year after year, so over a 10-year period, more than 500,000 beagles. It's 68,000 primates, and it's millions of other animals. And our government has just been on autopilot on this issue. And it really has taken a senior member of the HELP committee in the form of Senator Paul to get this issue moving after 84 years. So he introduced that bill and has gathered co-sponsors. It's got an amazing group of Democrats and Republicans backing it. He brought it to the floor on September 29th, got all the other senators in what is effectively a 100-0 vote to get this passed in the United States Senate. The House had passed its version of the bill as an amendment to a larger package, so that measure passed 392 to 28, the larger package did. But this provision was also very popular in the House. But now we have to take Senator Paul's bill, S5002, the FDA Modernization Act 2.0, and get that passed right after the election so that we can take full advantage of the Senate action that Senator Paul initiated. This bill is going to help, over time, millions of animals. It will spare them torment and loneliness and harm. It will also make our drug development process safer for patients. Adverse reactions to drugs used as prescribed are the fourth leading cause of death in the United States. The fourth leading cause. This system is broken from a cost perspective, from a safety perspective, and from an efficacy perspective. We have so many maladies and diseases that we're not solving, and we need to use the best innovative science to figure this out. So this is truly a marriage of animal welfare and human health and welfare. And obviously, Senator Paul needs no introduction here in his home state, but I just personally, on behalf of Animal Wellness Action and on behalf of animal welfare advocates across the country, I want to thank him so much for his leadership. And not just that, but for being effective in getting this done. We're really confident we're going to get this bill signed by the president before the end of the year. And it started with him in the United States Senate. So Senator Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Wayne. This truly is a great day for dogs, for beagles in particular, and for their owners. Anytime we can save the lives of our pets and not gratuitously use them in experiments that often amount to little more than torture is a day to celebrate. This bill lacks only one more vote. If we get that vote in the House, it'll become law. As a physician, I've been involved in research. I understand that there are times when we might have to test something on an animal to be safe enough to test on a human. But I understand also that it shouldn't be mandated, and that there can be many advances, and have been many advances over the last few decades, that would allow us to do experiments without having to first sacrifice animals. I also, from looking at some of the horrific research that's been done on, if you can call it research, on beagles, that I think really it doesn't fit with our modern sensibilities, and it shouldn't happen. And just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do it. For many years, for many decades, cosmetics were tested on animals, and now you see cosmetics advertised saying these cosmetics were not tested on animals. So we can test toxicity, and we've been able to do it, and there's whole marketing. In fact, huge portions of our public now buy cosmetics that were not tested on animals. So I think this is what the public wants. This bill doesn't mandate one way or the other, it just simply says it will not be mandated. You don't have to do it. As Wayne mentioned, there's a lot of times not a correlation between what happens in a dog and a human. So it might be safe in the dog and not safe in the human, or vice versa. It hasn't been very good science. So we should reassess the science. This bill will correct something that's been around since 1938. And I think it's high time that we get rid of this mandate. This is a much more reasonable policy, and I think this is a great step forward for all of America, particularly pets, pet owners, and all the beagles. Go Beagles. Thank you.